In our queries so far, when we've executed them, we have returned all of the columns on a particular table. As you saw from the previous example, the perf table has a lot of columns. What we've been doing is the equivalent in SQL of select star from table name. Well, as those of you who have worked with SQL for any length of time know, that is an extremely inefficient way of doing it. You typically do a select column 1, column 2, column 3 from table name. This is what project is going to do for us. We're going to pass in the perf table, and then we're going to tell it we want to project the object name, counter name, instance name, counter value, and time generated. And while this is executing, I just want to point out something else. I have listed one column per row. Now, if you look at my same as comment below it, I could have put this entire command on a single line. I think you'll agree, though, that having one column per line provides several advantages. First of all, I think it's certainly easier to read. Second, it makes it easier to rearrange should I decide I want to place counter value above the instance name. Finally, it's much easier to insert a new column, especially if I want to add that new column in the middle of this list. A fourth and final advantage is that making these queries as narrow as possible, in this case using the technique of one column per line, means you don't have to scroll back and forth so much on your display. This is especially important for when you're doing demos, like I am now, on a smaller resolution monitor. Here you can see in my output, I have just the 5 columns that I wanted: object name, counter name, instance name, counter value, and my time generated. One of the things that you'll do a lot is combine the project keyword with the extend. Here I'm going to have the same 5 columns, and then I'm going to take that output and put it into my extend. So when I run this query, we'll now see 8 columns in the output. And here we go. You can see I've got my various values. If I scroll to the right, you can see there's my free gigabyte, megabyte, and way off to the left is my kilobytes. I also want you to notice something. I have my counter value, and I need to have it in the project list so that I can use it inside my extend calculations. What if, though, I don't want my counter value to be returned in the end to the user? I only want the user to see my free gigabyte, megabyte, kilobyte columns. Well, I could add another project clause after this. As an alternative, I can place extend first. Here I have my extend. I add in the free columns. I then use project, and you can see in this case, in my project, I am not including the counter value. One of the key takeaways for this is if you want to use a value in a calculation, such as within this extend operator, I have to have it in the output. If I want to get rid of it, I have to get rid of it after I do my calculations. So now in my project, you can see I have removed the counter value along with the other unwanted columns from the final output. And so you can see at the bottom, I've got object, counter, instance, time generated, and then out at the end, free gigabyte, kilobyte, megabyte columns. I can actually use project to simulate the extend keyword. Here I have taken my project, I've got object, counter, instance, and time, and then I've created new calculated columns on the fly. So I've got my free GB column equals counter value divided by 1,000, and then similarly for megabyte and kilobyte. Now the advantage to this is that I don't have to have a special extend area just to create these 3 columns. And as you can see it output correctly, this matches what we just did. We have object, counter, instance, time, and then we've got the free gigabyte, megabyte, kilobyte columns. Now so far with project, we've had to explicitly state the columns that we want included in the output. Well, there's a variant on project called project away. The way project away works is it says, remove these columns from the output. So here for my performance table, we limit it to everything in the last hour. And then I'm going to get rid of the tenant ID, source system, counterpath, and the MG column. And here we are, we can see the various columns, and we've removed the tenant ID and the source system and the other columns. The advantage of project away is that if somebody comes along later and they were to add a new column to the perf table, that new column would automatically be included in the output. Project away is not used a great deal, but it can come in handy if you have a long list of columns in a table and you only want to remove one or two of them. Now, what if you're in a situation where you want to keep a column, but you want to rename it? We kind of simulated that a minute ago when we took the free megabyte column and set it equal to the counter value. But if you remember in the output, we still had both the counter value and the free MB column. If we actually wanted to get rid of that counter value altogether, we can actually just simply use a project rename. Here you can see I'm taking a very simple query, where time generated greater than an hour ago, and I'm going to rename the computer column to my renamed computer. So we'll execute this. And here we go. You can now see the computer column has now been renamed to my renamed computer. So there you go. There's 3 ways that you can alter the output of your particular query. We have project, project away, and project rename.